Better isn't good enough for the state of Kansas when it comes to your Medicaid service from Aetna. And a loophole in insurance laws could leave you with a bill in an accident involving food delivery app drivers. Plus, another arrest and a child death in Wichita raises more complaints about the Department of Children and Families, DCF. That's what we're talking about right now on Kansas Week. Well, hello everyone. I'm Chris Frank in for Pilar Pedraza, and this is Kansas Week. The mother of a Wichita toddler found dead in a motel last May now faces felony murder charges, the latest arrest in a series of child deaths in Wichita. Emergency workers responding to a 911 call found 2-year-old Zayden Janus Aklua dead in a South Broadway motel room on May 31st. Thursday, officers booked his mother, Michelle Compass, into the Sedgwick County Jail on first-degree murder charges. Investigators say information from the Regional Forensic Science Center led to the arrest, though the autopsy report is not complete at this time. Shelby Curry, who raised Zayden for about a year of his life, told the Wichita Eagle, "I'm very relieved that they made an arrest, and I'm glad they got her into custody now. That is a big relief, but I will be fully relieved when they convict her." The Eagle reports Michelle Compass denied any wrongdoing in a Facebook message to the paper last month. She told the paper his death was the result of a medical condition, that he had been hospitalized the week before his death for a seizure. She wrote, "They kept us a weekend and released us and thought things were normal, but I am questioning it because I know as a mother I didn't neglect my son and never would." Zayden's family says they reported his condition to the Department of Children and Families several times. DCF has not commented on the case. Well, joining me on the desk this week to discuss this story and more, we have Rodney Wren, a political analyst and former speechwriter for then Congressman Mike Pompeo, State Representative John Carmichael, a Wichita Democrat, and Sedgwick County Commissioner Jim Howell, Wichita Republican. Thanks for all of you being with us. I'll get that right. I apologize for that. So, a sad story here to start with. By the Wichita Eagle's reckoning, this is the ninth child under the age of at least 5 to die in Wichita under serious circumstances in less than 2 years. And the question, is this a reflection of low staffing and maybe organizational problems at the Department for Children and Families, DCF, or is it also a sign of our societal problems? What do you say?
Yes, yes, and yes.
Yes, yes, and yes.
Well, I kind of agree. Yeah. DCF is a very difficult job, and I feel sorry for them because they do their very best. I have no doubt they do their best. I know they care for kids and they try to follow the state law, but hindsight's always 20/20. It's easy to see backwards and see they made a mistake. They should have taken a child away from an abusive situation. They either didn't have the data they needed at the time, or they misjudged something. It's tragic when we see these types of results. On the other hand, I don't really want them to take children away from a situation where there's not abuse, but they sometimes do that as well. And so it's just a really tough situation to be in with DCF, and I don't like stories like this, of course. I'm not sure that any agency is ever going to get this exactly right, but obviously there was mistakes made in this case for sure.
Yeah, and talk about transparency. DCF won't even discuss how involved it was in Zayden's case at this point, and a lot of times they don't anyway until after all the facts come out. But should they be responsible for opening up about that information now?
Well, let's take a little historical perspective. In the mid-90s, we went away from the Department of Social and Rehabilitation Services providing these services directly. We moved toward a contractor model, a privatization model, and frankly, there have been problems ever since, no matter whether it was a Republican in office or a Democrat in office. But during the last 8 years, before Governor Kelly came into office, We had an austerity program in state government to pay for lawyers like me not having to pay any taxes. And social services is a big plum where people think they can cut the money. So we cut TANF program payments, temporary assistance to needy families. The University of Kansas says that has forced more children into foster care because their parents don't have any money to take care of them because we've cut it down to a very short period of time. We got rid of a whole bunch of master's social level people at DCF because we couldn't afford them. Well, you put that in combination and this is what happens. The transparency issue, I still have criticisms of DCF under the current administration. Now, they have explained to me that one of the reasons for the delay was because Wichita Police Department had not made a determination that this was in fact a homicide as opposed to some other type of death, and so that delayed release of information. We passed statutes last year at the 2 years ago at the recommendation of Governor Collier's administration that was supposed to fix this. It didn't. And I can go on and on and on these topics. The good news is the legislature authorized an additional 42 positions for this very type of investigation, and as of last week, 95% of those jobs had been filled. And I hope that's going to make a difference. But it is a systemic problem that has been long in the making, and there are societal factors that are beyond the control of government that are involved in this.
Right. Well, it's a sad story all the way around, and we'll be hearing more as this goes
Let me
through.
back up, though. I don't mean to address this particular case because I do not know the facts of this matter, but in general, that's the problem.
Absolutely, and that's what we're talking about, and more will come out, like I say, as it winds its way through the courts. Moving on, we also have ripple effects from last weekend's fire at the Tyson meatpacking plant down there in Holcomb in Finney County, and that continues to spread through the state. KSN's Hunter Funk takes a look at how the resulting temporary closure of the plant is affecting local businesses.
This gas station is the closest business to the Tyson plant, and after seeing a mostly empty parking lot, spoke with an employee who says it's been extremely slow. And they aren't the only business that's experiencing this.
It's definitely going to be a big effect.
Ron Leonard, a business owner of a small market, is feeling the impact of the Tyson plant shut down.
We're having to go to Amarillo and different places, picking up, trying to pick meat up to keep ourselves going until Tyson gets going.
The market sells groceries, gas, and fresh meat, and it buys all their meat through Tyson, even offering a discount to Tyson employees. But that's been put on hold until Tyson returns to production, which makes things more expensive for Leonard.
The labor and you know, the trucking, and it's still going to cost more to get it here.
Tyson Fresh Meats Group President Steve Stouffer says the last crane will come to the plant today so they can begin cleanup through the roof, which has Leonard hopeful that Tyson will rebuild quickly and begin production as soon as possible.
I hope they get her back going, and it's sure going to make it a lot easier on our operation, I can tell you that.
Here for you in Finney County, Hunter Funk, KSN News 3.
Well, I see both a macro and micro story here, macroeconomic story, the big picture. You think about it, this Tyson plant, well, Tyson is the 6th largest employer in Kansas, and they have something like 5,600 employees, 3,000 or so down there. I think some of the good news is what we've heard that they're planning on rebuilding, but also this impacts, it makes a bottleneck. It makes a bottleneck for the livestock producers, but it also could impact consumers. What do you think?
It's a big enough situation. It's going to impact the state's economy, and certainly that community is going to be on hold for quite a long time while they get this plant back on track. So I'm extremely grateful for the news they plan on reopening this plant, but man, that's going to take a little bit of time to get this done. In the meantime, the income taxes, the sales taxes, obviously contractor work is going to have to be done. There's a lot of things that have to happen. This is a huge bump in the state's economy. So.
Right.
Tyson says they're continue to pay for their employees.
That's
all of the rest of the people who provide services because of that generator out there are not going to be working.
Right.
And you have to couple this. That's 25% of the beef slaughter in Kansas is processed there, Combine that with what's going on with international trade policy vis-a-vis China, and farmers and ranchers are in a difficult situation. Interestingly, though, our Secretary of Agriculture's former president of Kansas Livestock Association, he, along with the Commerce Secretary and the governor, met with the president of Tyson this week in Garden City, and they're going to rebuild that plant, and that rebuilding process will create jobs.
Yeah, that's true.
And I would just say it actually doesn't create jobs, because the revenue lost from the fire doesn't create jobs. That revenue
No,
was,
but
the revenue was
building
lost.
the plant creates jobs.
Yeah.
Rebuilding doesn't.
Rebuild.
Possibly the initial building, but
I don't
rebuilding.
know how you plan to rebuild a plant without hiring people to do it, Rodney.
You have to, but it's
It creates jobs.
Frederick's Bastiat's the seen versus the unseen. So if they wouldn't have had to have rebuilt, they would have spent that money elsewhere. So
They would have spent it in other states.
Yeah.
No, you can't. You can't predict that. You can't say that. So
My, Rodney.
I don't. It's a sad situation, but it's the nature of economics.
Right.
And unfortunately for those people down there, and for maybe Kansas as a whole, we may feel some economic crunch from this, but it's just the nature
Tough thing
of
is,
the game.
farmers don't have a market to sell their soybeans in China, and now 25% of the processing capacity in Kansas for cattlemen is gone, and we're looking at cattle futures prices plunging, and that's not going to be good for our state's economy.
I
I think we can agree with that.
Totally understand that, but the question is, does it warrant some kind of government action? I would argue no.
I don't think anybody said it should.
Yeah.
But I totally agree with you that the international situation is a big part of the problem.
Kansas is open for business, and I think it's a good thing the governor, the Secretary of Agriculture, and the Secretary of Commerce were out there on the scene talking to the president of Tyson saying, we want to keep your business here. That's the kind of governmental action that we need.
Absolutely.
And that's what we did.
And what do you think about this? I mean, I thought about that also. You very well know that just right here in Sedgwick County, a Tyson chicken plant, of course, was turned down. The people didn't want it. But so, tell me this: do you think that Tyson has the viewpoint, hey, we want to stay in a community that's already welcomed us? When them talking about rebuilding, if that factors into it,
I think that's really a big part of this, actually, that the community there really needs Tyson, and Tyson needs the place to do their business. And so it's a very symbiotic relationship. I think the community is great for Tyson there, and Tyson really likes to have a place that wants them to be there. So this is great for Tyson to make this decision and to replace that plant or that activity someplace else.
Yeah.
Can you imagine the controversies that would happen in some new communities, just like we saw here in Sedgwick County?
Makes
So the
sense
good-
to put it on the same footprint.
Right.
So the good news is they're going to rebuild. And going to the subject of other food, we're talking about beef there, but from here, we're talking about Grubhub and Uber Eats. Any of you guys, have you had deliveries to your house?
Oh, yeah.
Well, from Grubhub to Uber Eats, national companies are making billions of dollars bringing you food from your favorite restaurants. But some are letting their drivers pay the price if there's an accident on the road. So Cake News investigator Pilar Pedraza uncovered how a minor accident revealed a major crack in insurance coverage rules.
It's fast, it's easy, and it's often kind of tasty. Ordering food on an app on your phone is the new rage. But as one Wichita woman found out, it can cost you hundreds, if not thousands of dollars more than you expected to spend. And that's whether you're the person ordering the food or delivering it.
So I ordered some ice cream from Burger King.
Teresa Thiessen wanted to get her kids a tasty treat. For convenience, she used the Grubhub app to place the order. But the delivery driver brought more than just ice cream.
I stayed upstairs, and that's when I heard a crash.
Teresa says the driver pulled into the driveway too fast and hit her car.
I got a call from Allstate stating that the driver did take fault in striking the vehicle, but because she only had personal insurance and not commercial insurance, they wouldn't cover it.
Leaving Teresa with a $1,500 repair bill. Attorney Sean Brennan specializes in accident recovery cases.
Most people who have a personal auto policy don't understand that there is an exclusion that excludes coverage for you if you're transporting people for money or if you're transporting food for money.
When you go online to sign up to be a driver for one of these apps, they talk about all sorts of things. How old you need to be, how much experience driving you need, and that you need a driver's license and auto insurance. But they don't say what kind. State Farm is one of the few insurance companies that already provides extended coverage with a personal policy. A spokesperson told us, quote, an endorsement would not be necessary for our policy related to delivery services. However, there is an exclusion for damage to the property of others, such as the food or goods being transported for delivery. When Allstate denied Teresa's claim, she turned to Grubhub expecting help. In their statement to Cake News, the company said their driver is compliant with state insurance laws and that the fender bender wasn't even caused by their driver, a denial never made in Allstate's letter to Teresa.
Irresponsible of a company to not let their employees know they need insurance.
Janet Ruiz with the Insurance Information Institute says a big part of the problem is state laws not keeping up with changes in technology. Kansas currently does not have a bill in the works.
So many of us order food that way, the more prevalent it becomes, the more accidents are going to be.
According to Statista market research, the number of people using food delivery apps grew by more than 8 million just in the last 2 years. The companies doing it right, Uber Eats and Postmates, both confirmed to Cake News they provide coverage for all drivers in the case of an accident.
I expect that if they are driving for that company, then they have some type of insurance that'll cover them while they're, delivering the food.
I think these large companies are saying, that's an expense we don't want to bear. So we're just not going to do it.
Pilar Pedraza, Cake News, investigates.
Well, this isn't the first time that we've heard of laws not keeping up with the technology, and I'm reminded that this has probably come up even when pizza started being delivered decades ago. But, from the lawmakers' standpoint, how do they catch up? Is this something where a problem comes to light and then somehow it finds its way to the State House?
My friend Sean Brennan describes the situation accurately. Most personal automobile insurance policies don't cover you if you are delivering things, carrying goods or people for hire. And that's been the law forever. What we have actually is some people in this marketplace, some companies that are trying to treat these folks as independent contractors say we're not responsible for their actions and therefore we don't have to pay. And I think if somebody takes them to court and challenges this, there well be a different outcome. But the example that we had 3 years ago was Uber, the ride-sharing service. In fact, Uber and Lyft both came in and said, we want some regulation here to make sure that people are safe and qualified to drive, and second, that they have insurance for any damages or injuries that they cause. Legitimate businesses want that type of a level playing field. But there are some people in the market right now who apparently are either denying their responsibility or perhaps don't have non-owned vehicle insurance coverage. I think it's something that the Kansas Insurance Department, I'm pretty sure that Commissioner Schmidt is well aware of this, and if there's a statutory change needed, I'm confident that Vicki Schmidt will bring it to us and we'll probably adopt it.
And probably in the meantime, maybe drivers, Uber drivers, Grubhub drivers, maybe out of prudence should check their insurance policies and maybe pay a little extra just to cover themselves with that rider.
If the carrier offers that rider, this story says that State Farm offers that type of a rider. But yes, if you're going to use your vehicle to haul food or people or whatever for hire, you better check with your insurance agent, see if you have any insurance.
And speaking of insurance in another way, the state of Kansas says better isn't good enough for you when it comes to how Aetna is handling its Medicaid contract. Aetna sent a letter to the state of Kansas this week, insisting it's doing better living up to the terms of its $1 billion a year contract as one of the state's 3 Medicaid operators. KDHE raised a series of concerns about how the company is operating in Kansas last month, including credentialing medical providers for billing and problems with claims. More than a half year after Aetna began operating in Kansas, issues with service are still a problem. The Kansas City Star searched an online database of unresolved claims. It showed Aetna had 28 systemic problems since January, compared to 4 for Sunflower State and 1 for United Healthcare, the other Medicaid operators. The state would not release the improvement plan Aetna sent last Tuesday, saying it's asked the company to submit a new corrective action plan and plans to meet with Aetna leadership to negotiate a resolution that best services CanCare members. So the question is, where does this leave current CanCare members right now with Aetna? Anybody weigh in on that, and what happens if they can't reach an agreement?
They still have coverage. They shouldn't worry about that. If the state cancels the contract, it won't affect the current policies. It'll just mean that you're not with Aetna at the next renewal. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think Aetna's going to toe the line.
And the reality is, I think that it's a constant change. You know, these providers today may not always be the ones we have in the future. It's going to be something that's going to change over time. Each of them is going to do well, and they're going to have problems. They're going to find those problems. They're going to fix those problems, and it's going to continue to be competitive. It's going to continue to be a work in progress. The reality is, this is just the nature of CanCare. It's competitive providers. The idea is, of course, would lower the cost. And John and I were just talking a minute ago. I voted for it. He wants to expand it. The reality is, I think the state is
Medicaid. Whether it's through private contractors, that's a different issue, Jim.
Well, I think at the end of the day, the state had a projection that said that we had to do something to solve some problems here, and turn this over to a competitive market. Actually, did reduce the cost quite a lot for the state of Kansas, which we can expand the care to others that have the needs, lower the waiting list, things like that. So the program actually does work, but obviously it's not going to stay 100% all the time. When you change providers, you've got to check to make sure they're doing the right things at the right way, and that's exactly what this is.
There is some evidence, though, that these cost savings that have been claimed by the prior administration through this program were as a result of denial and delay of claims as opposed to efficiencies. My wife was in this field when the transition was made. They had to hire all sorts of new people, go through a lot more paperwork. I'm not sure this program is really working, but by the same token, you can't tear it down overnight.
Was there a better way now?
I would argue that it was a better way when the state of Kansas through SRS was administering these benefits. There weren't the delays, there weren't the doctors going unpaid, there weren't the problems with certification of providers. I don't think that this was necessarily a good idea.
But that's what we have right now.
That's right. It's what we got. So we're going to live with it.
And there are about 400,000, I think, that are in the program in Kansas.
And if Medicaid were expanded and placed into this model, we'd be looking at putting another 100 to 150,000 subscribers into that pool.
And I'll just chime in that the elephant in the room is, according to the latest Medicare trustees report, federal money for these programs that goes to the states, that then the states decide how that they're going to spend it, is bankrupt by 2024.
But you're talking about Medicare. This is Medicaid,
yes,
a
but
different
but
program,
it all comes
all
through the
administered
same-
by CMS, but it is a completely different trust fund, completely different funding source.
From the federal government?
Yes.
That's not how I
The Medicare trust fund is different than the transfer payments from Medicaid to states.
Okay, I stand corrected.
But I agree. In the long term, we've got to fund Medicare. I'm getting close.
Right.
All right. Well, moving on to another subject that we're tackling tonight. Westar has decided the fight over giant power poles in one Wichita neighborhood just isn't worth having. Instead, it's going to replace the poles with smaller, standard-size ones. KSN's John Acebus shows us what's happening.
They trying to fix they right, they wrong. I mean, what else can you do?
Kevin Lowe has a more than 100-foot power pole standing in his backyard.
It didn't bother me as much as everybody else.
Catherine Hicks, she has one next door.
Hate them, hate them, hate them.
Love them or not, their time may be dwindling.
We expect that all of the poles would be replaced with a smaller pole.
Westar officials have promised to revisit the project and remove and replace a number of the poles, mainly the ones that don't sit on a street corner.
What we're looking at with some of the poles would be replacing them with smaller poles and then moving them closer to the road. We expect that probably the same number of poles would be involved.
Well, I'm happy if that's what they're really going to do, but I don't trust them.
The poles are in Councilmember Brandon Johnson's district, and since they were put up, he's been working to bring them down. What he's been met with is compromise from the company.
I would believe that we would see some form of movement this fall when the demand on the electric system is a little bit less. But we'll find out more at that public meeting.
This fall, the company plans to meet with community members to discuss an alternative power source. Westar officials say they hope by the end of 2020, some of these poles won't stand so high.
And I hope it's sooner than later.
John Acebus, KSN News 3.
So they're making some changes. What do you think happened here? You think maybe there was a public relations communications problem?
I think they goofed. We live in a state that's prone to traumatic thunderstorms, and these poles are a lot more sturdy than those wooden poles. So I think Westar saw probably a need, but they didn't think it entirely through. Those bigger poles can carry thicker power lines, so you've got a better, more efficient way of transferring energy. Electricity is lost the longer it's transferred along those lines. Those bigger poles can carry bigger wires. You get a better efficient transfer of electricity. So I think Westar probably thought they were doing a good thing. They just carried it out problematically. It's nice to see them taking a step back. The question is, there's going to be cost associated with replacing these poles. Where is that cost bearing going to come from? Are they going to have to raise rates? Or are they just going to have to eat it because there's so much customer dissatisfaction? Unfortunately the nature of the beast when you've got a monopoly that controls your electricity.
Yeah, that's going to be an issue. Whether KCC allows them to recoup the cost of tearing down these poles and replacing them out of customer ratepayer base. And there's going to be a lot of us watching careful for that. The other thing, these are the wires that were necessary to supply the new innovation campus at WSU. It comes from the Munson sub. They could have taken it other ways, but they took it basically down 17th Street.
Wow. It's amazing that they were able, the community was able to get them to change it. So kudos for them.
Yes.
Well, I tell you what, the show goes fast, and I want to give thanks again to Rodney, John, and Jim for joining me. And we'd also like to thank our news partners at KSN News, Cake News, and the Wichita Eagle for sharing their materials with us. I hope you've enjoyed our discussions. We'd like to hear your thoughts on today's topics or future ideas for shows. Just email us at kansasweek@kpts.org. For now, have a great week.